Hello and welcome to another episode of Disney Movie Investigation. If this is your first time watching, welcome to the show. In each episode, we take a look at a movie that is featured on Disney+. On this episode, we are going back to the early 2000s as we take a look at Bubble Boy. And stay tuned for our bonus story as we take a look at the history of the Great Movie Ride. And if you are enjoying these episodes, I do ask that you please hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be notified with each new video. Now, sit back and enjoy this episode of Disney Movie Investigation. Today we are covering Bubble Boy. This movie was released on August 24th, 2001. It was directed by Blair Hayes, and the screenplay was written by Cinco Paul and Ken Dario. It was distributed, the production company was Touchstone Pictures, and it was distributed by Buena Vista Distribution. The budget for this movie was $13 million, and unfortunately it did a box office return of just $5 million. So there's not a lot of history or backstory to this one. This is one of those early 2000 comedies that Disney put under the Touchstone label because they did have very little faith in it. But in terms of the cast, we have Jake Gyllenhaal, who plays Jimmy Livingston, Swoosie Kurtz, who plays Mrs. Livingston, Marley Shelton, who plays Chloe, Danny Trejo, who plays Slim, Dave Sheridan, who plays Mark, John Carroll Lynch, who plays Morton Livingston, Vern Troy, who plays Dr. Ferrick, Zach Galifianakis, who plays the bus stop man, and Stacy Keibler as the working girl. In terms of the plot, this is about the story of a boy named Jimmy Livingston who was born without an immune system. Because of this, he is forced to live inside of a plastic bubble dome in his bedroom, which has led students at a local high school to nickname him the Bubble Boy. But when Jimmy discovers the new girl Chloe has moved next door, he is immediately taken with her beauty. Then they immediately become fast friends, and much to Mrs. Livingston's jealousy. However, one day Chloe announces that she is leaving for Niagara Falls to marry Mark, a man who once ridiculed Jimmy as they were younger. And so Jimmy builds a mobile bubble suit and takes off to Niagara Falls, determined to stop the wedding before it is too late. So in terms of recommending this movie is unfortunately not great. A lot of stereotypical jokes, a lot of jokes that do a disservice to the story. The story does not really flow very well. It's basically like segment where Jimmy meets new person, make a couple jokes, then move on to the next person. The relationship between Jimmy and Chloe is not believable. I can see them as friends, but not as a relationship. It seems really forced. This one, unfortunately, is one that I would give a big pass. It's probably not one I'm going to watch, and I don't even think Jake Gyllenhaal is really going back and thinking of this with positive memories. So let's move on to positive things as we talk about our bonus story. So the Great Movie Ride was a dark ride that was located at Disney's Hollywood Studios in Orlando, Florida at Walt Disney World. The ride was an experience of some of the greatest movies with animatronic figures as well as live actors and film clips. The attraction opened on May 1st, 1989 and closed on August 13th, 2007. So the development of the Great Movie Ride is what created the need for Hollywood Studios. This ride was originally intended for a show business pavilion in Epcot, originally titled Great Moments at the Movies. However, Disney CEO Michael Eisner and Imagineer Marty Sklar would conclude that the concept was too big for a single pavilion and decided to build an entire theme park around the idea. The theme park was MGM Studios, and it was put into development shortly thereafter. So because the ride used animatronics based on real-life actors, the families of those actors would have to sign off on their likeness rights for them to be used in the attractions. Most of the actors said no problem and agreed to do it. However, a couple of them refused to sign off on their likeness rights. One of the more famous examples was Lee Marvin, whose family refused to sign off because he would be depicted as a drunk in one of his more famous movie roles, Cat Ballou. So instead, they went to Clint Eastwood, who agreed to sign off on his likeness rights. On the opening day of the attraction, Mickey, Donald, Minnie, Goofy, and Roger Rabbit would take place in a ceremony similar to those in the Hollywood, where they would place their handprints in the cement. But let's take a look at the ride itself. So guests would line up in the lobby of the theater, where they would travel past various display cases of props from actual movies, and these included the horse from Mary Poppins. The pre-show would also feature trailers of the various movies that were featured in the attraction, and while the guests would wait in the lobby until it was their turn to enter their theater-style ride vehicle. Guests were loaded into a 2-car theater-style ride vehicle, and the vehicle would be moved across a guided wire. At the front of the vehicle would be your cast member narrator, who would take you through a journey through the history of the movies. The first scene that guests would see would be the musical segment, where guests would see segments from Footlight Parade, Singin' in the Rain, and Mary Poppins. Guests then traveled into the gangster movie section, where they would see James Cagney from Public Enemy, and also this is where the ride would split off into 2 different areas. If you were in vehicle 1A, the ride vehicle was taken over by a gangster, and there would be a shootout with animatronics. If you were in ride vehicle 2B, you would continue on the ride with no shootout. The next scene is the Western scene, where you would see animatronics of both Clint Eastwood and John Wayne. This is where, if you were in ride vehicle 2B, your vehicle was taken over by a bank robber, and then both vehicles 2B and 1A would continue before into the next scene. The next scene is the sci-fi section, where you would see the Nostromos from Aliens, where an alien above would pop out at the guests. The next scene being the ancient tomb from Raiders of the Lost Ark, and at the top of the scene, or the top of the temple, that being watched over by a cloaked temple guard. Both the cowboy and the gangster that had taken over the ride vehicles are attracted to the jewel, and despite warnings from the temple guard, they attempt to remove the jewel, only to meet a certain fate. The temple guard is then revealed to be your cast member narrator, who rejoins you for the remainder of the ride. The next scene is the horror scene, where guests encounter a mummy's tomb before going into the jungle kingdom of Tarzan. Guests are then taken into the final scene of Casablanca, followed by a section of the Sorcerer Mickey from Fantasia. The last big sequence is where you are taken into the world of Oz, and the guests have a meeting with the Wicked Witch of the West in Munchkinland. The finale of the ride is a segment where all the cars join together, and you're in a screening room where guests can watch clips from the most famous movies, and these were all movies from either Disney or MGM. So this was a popular attraction. It was one of the highlights of MGM / Hollywood Studios. So why did it close? On July 15, 2017, it was announced that the ride would close so that it could be repurposed for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railroad. The ride had a final celebration on August 13th of 2017, where guests could also purchase finale merchandise to celebrate the legacy of the ride. So I love this ride. I think it was a really great addition to, it was one of those must-dos for Hollywood Studios. I could see why they replaced it with Mickey and Minnie, especially Mickey and Minnie up until that point didn't have an attraction of their own. The other thing too is there were complaints, especially towards the end of the ride, that the movies were starting to become a little dated, and a lot of people didn't know the movies that were being featured in the ride. So definitely, it had its place in time. It was really great. Memories are still there. You can still see YouTube clips of the finale screening room sequence. They're on YouTube, so you can check those out if you ever want to. But yeah, great movie ride, will be sorely missed. So thank you so much for joining us here on another episode of Disney Movie Investigation. I would love for anyone to comment below on what they think of Bubble Boy, as well as if you have fond memories of the great movie ride. I would love for you to share your memories. So as we look forward to our next episode, we're going to be taking a look at a modern favorite as we take a look at Jojo Rabbit. So until next time, I hope you have a magical day, and we will see you real soon.